In recent months, I have battled to get the truth out about Child Protective Services and how its conduct impacts families across the nation. Tonight, I'm very happy to be joined by a woman named Karina Feng of San Francisco, California. Born in Taiwan, she came to America to be part of the American dream, and she had a family here in the United States. She has a master's degree in strategic government from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Her father, a respected doctor, and her family have been involved in the Taiwanese liberation movement for decades. She is someone who now does not have her children, and she's here to tell us that Paul Pelosi Jr., the son of current House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she believes is responsible for that. Karina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me.
Karina, let's start at the beginning. How did you first meet Paul Pelosi Jr.?
The first time I've met Paul Pelosi Jr., his hair was to his shoulders and his presentation looked like Jesus back in 1998. He later told me it was since 1996, but where he came into my holistic naturopathic clinic at that time with an album asking me to consider him for remodeling or construction work. He continued coming every day, disregarding my refusal of remodeling services. He would demand all patrons of my clinic to leave, and they would just leave. And then he would sit down, fold his legs over the top of my counter and start making conversation. One time he bought 2 Snapples and a small tray of sushi from Walgreens across the street. And he said, "Apple, have some Snapples. See, they made this for you." As I'm blunt with a yes or no closed-ended responses, he would just stare at me and I would ask him to leave. He kept coming like this for 2 months every day. Then I closed the clinic since there was no meaning to having the service there when Paul is having everyone leave. So I returned to that location in 2006 because I wanted my dad to take care of me while I was pregnant. And the very next day, Paul came into his clinic, this time with clean-cut hair. Yet Paul was doing the same thing with my dad's clinic, that is, telling everyone to leave. My dad ignored his behavior over the years and continued to work hard while taking care of me. After my dad suddenly died, and Paul showed up in the San Francisco General Hospital every day while I overheard one female doctor in the ICU telling the staff to not wake up my dad and let him die. She specifically said, "Don't wake him up." The whole hospital process was horrific as the Child Protective Service tried to take my children because I caught the paramedics getting instructions to intentionally shock my dad with a defibrillator when he was fine. They decided to leave my family alone when they came up with the idea to not admit having my dad in their hospital. My cousin Donna works as a hospital administrator in another hospital. She had to barge into every ICU room in order to find my dad before the hospital admitted to having my dad in their ICU. After my dad passed away, Paul insisted that I abort my 5 months pregnancy or else he would take my life. I had 3 older children at the time I must take care of, so after ongoing daily threats from Paul Pelosi Jr., I had no choice but to abort my precious child just to stay alive for my living children. Paul Pelosi Jr. suddenly scolded me saying, "Don't you realize all these years, all that I've done for you is because I love you?" I said, "I don't believe it. You always bring different women, and Nicole Bullock always tells me you're her boyfriend. How can I believe you would love me and expect me to love someone who already loves someone else?" Paul suddenly showed me his text with Nicole Bullock, showing how Nicole was complaining about her boyfriend Andrew's clammy palms touching her. Paul said the whole point of bringing other women was a front. So if you turn me down, I won't get that embarrassed. So the person that I ever loved is you and only you, and I want our relationship to be private. So that's exactly what he said. And after that, Paul Pelosi Jr. would regularly go on trips out of town, out of country, and then he would call me every day and see me as soon as he returns.
Now, Ms. Feng, you are actually suing Paul Pelosi Jr. now, alleging that he defrauded you out of some property, and we're going to get into that. Can you talk about your experience with Nancy Pelosi around 2006?
Yes, Nancy Pelosi called out of the blue on my cell phone and said, "I'm Nancy Pelosi. I want to make an appointment." And so before she came into my dad's clinic, a bunch of Secret Service and security came in and checked everywhere. Then Nancy Pelosi came in with a big smile and sat down. Nancy Pelosi said, "I had to come here because my son and my husband comes here every day, so I want to know the real reason why they're coming." And as Nancy Pelosi turned her head looking straight at me while she's finishing saying that. Then she came every day from opening to closing time of my dad's clinic while Secret Service waits outside. Sometimes they would block off the street, and that extended to over a year. Nancy Pelosi would spend the entire afternoon in our bathroom, and the fan would be on, making calls, yelling on the phone ongoingly. And other days she would sit in a waiting area all day and make all-day calls. Nancy Pelosi's stopped coming to my dad's clinic after Craig Johnson's wife, Nikki Johnson. He's one of the J.P. Morgan owners and one of the owners of the Warriors basketball team in Oakland. So his wife, Nikki Johnson, found out Nancy Pelosi's coming every day, and they started coming to my dad's clinic every day to yell at Nancy Pelosi over some agenda issues affecting her husband's business. And another patron came, Andrew, told us that Nancy Pelosi tried to avoid that and did not come back after the scolding from Nikki Johnson. So we all thought it was weird how Nancy Pelosi would have news all over her patroning one Union Street beauty salon for her hair, yet no one ever talked about Nancy Pelosi patroning my dad's clinic every day, all day, for over a year before and during her first term as House Speaker. Sometimes we would wonder how she runs her job as House Speaker every day, just being at our place making calls all day.
Mm-hmm. So your father's clinic where he would treat people, this is now the property that you feel you've been defrauded out of. This property, many people say, is now filled with drugs and prostitution. We're going to get a little bit more into that. Nancy Pelosi actually knew that her son was trying to force you to have an abortion. Is that right?
Yes. The very next day, Paul Pelosi, the reason why I had an abortion so it started because Paul Pelosi Jr. said he wanted me to have his child and no one else's. And Paul Pelosi Jr. has been mad at me for having 3 children already. However, this time he caught me while being pregnant. So he must stop my pregnancy before I have another child that does not belong to him. So I tried to tell his mother about what Paul Pelosi Jr. forced me to do. And right after my abortion, his mother declared on her website right away that she was pro-abortion. So I gave up right then and there.
Did Nancy Pelosi acknowledge you when you tried to reach out to her? How did you try to reach out to her to tell her about this?
I did not reach out to her because as soon as I reached out, I saw the declaration on a website about pro-abortion. So I just gave up. I understood. I knew her and I understood what she was trying to do. So I just backed off because that would be her usual functions. If she was trying to answer someone, she would just do it that way.
It's now been a year since you've seen your 4 children, including a 1-year-old baby that you had. Why do you believe that Paul Pelosi Jr. was involved in the CPS case against you?
The CPS petition said the anonymous caller said things about me that only Paul Pelosi Jr. knew. For example, he wanted me to keep our relationship private. So at the time, I didn't tell anyone. But the caller knew about me having a baby or trying to have a baby with Paul. So whichever way the anonymous caller worded it, blaming everything on me, already reveals that it's either Paul Pelosi Jr. that called or someone he instructed to call the CPS, because no one around me ever knew why I needed to get an abortion, and only Paul knew. On top of that, Paul Pelosi Jr. texted me to threat taking the children by protective services if I didn't listen to him, and that CPS and that CPS treatment will be a long and ongoing tragedy.
Can you describe the last time that you saw Paul Pelosi Jr.?
The last time I saw Paul Pelosi Jr., he was spending the week with me at my apartment in San Mateo, California. After I came out of CPS court, he waited for me in the car and drove me back to San Francisco's Harrison Street Chevron gas station, where he told me to get into the driver's seat and that he has to leave the country and wait for the FBI to cool down before he returns, because the FBI's were contacting me to ask questions about Paul Pelosi Jr. So he said he does not want to be near me in case the FBI knew where I was, they would be able to find him. So the last time I've received a call was from a Signal app that he joined, that Paul Pelosi Jr. joined on June 4th, 2019.
We've reached out to Mr. Pelosi Jr. with no response. Why do you think he would be concerned about the FBI being after him? And did you speak with the FBI?
I did speak a little bit with the FBI, but I was afraid to talk to them because Paul was right beside me. So I felt that if I would say anything, at all, he would hurt me. And so I was afraid to talk. And then he instructed me to put in some text to the FBI saying, I'll get back to you later. Everything's fine. I think Paul's fine and stuff like that. He instructed me to text the FBI back in those words.
Did he ever express to you what it is that he does for a living?
He has a bunch of strange shell businesses. He talks about one company after another, and there's really nothing going on. But he expresses it as if there's something going on to get a bunch of investors. He's always on the phone talking to investors and telling them about how wonderful and how lucrative, for example, a marijuana outlet in Canada was going to be, and they had their own people call back and forth claiming that they were held Canadian officers, but then one of the investors were able to trace the call, and it was from their own cell phone. So I don't understand what that's about, and I'm not for what he does. I'm not exactly sure what he does, and he's not able to explain it other than the fact that it's all shells, or I haven't seen him work a day. All I've seen is he's working, but not in a legitimate position. Rather, it's in a very strange, like always on the phone, instructing people to invest in something that's not there, some kind of thing like that. And he's always busy forging signatures with this red kind of pencil that you draw on pictures. He's always doing that, and I don't understand what's the point of forging people's signatures. I mean, if somebody trusts you enough to talk to you or communicate business with you, why do you want to screw them up? I mean, how is anybody going to trust you in the future, right? And he said, go away. Why bother him? You're too honest. If you are so honest, you can't get any business done. You can't get any business done these days. And he just has that mentality. It's really hard to understand why he thinks like that.
Did he ever talk about overseas trips, or was he ever around foreign businessmen?
Yeah, he's always traveling. He travels like every month. He travels, and sometimes he'll leave for a couple of days, and sometimes he'll be gone for a week or more. Yeah, he's always traveling. And when I was with him in 2015, the entire year, he would be, in 2015, he would always be in my house because I was pregnant, and then he wanted me to get an abortion, and then prior to that, he keeps saying that he keeps asking me why am I always tired. He didn't know I was pregnant, and then in 2014, he would always go, I need to go to Health Canada. I need to go to Canada. I need to talk to the big company or whatever. Really, it turned out that it was some kind of a sham, and all the investors got screwed. Yeah, then later after that, he went to Greece, and I don't know what's he doing there.
Did he ever speak about either hurting you or hurting other people?
Yeah. He always talk about breaking my tenants' legs, breaking the social workers' legs. He's trying to punch me one time when he found out that I was trying to report what he did to my building. He keeps, and then the customers that I was dealing with, I'm working as a real estate broker as well in California, and he's also a real estate broker sometimes. He would want to join with me in my deals, and he'll screw up every single deal. There's not one deal he doesn't screw up. He'll go in front of my customer and tell them that their building or their property or their business is worthless. And then later on, he'll come up with some fraud document, and then he'll say that he'll try to purchase he'll purchase the property, and then he'll come up with this West Edge halo, which is he's using on me now. And then he'll say they're trying to purchase it at some, for example, if the business is $6.8 million, he'll offer like $2 million and tell the owner that their business is worthless. And then he'll screw up the deal, and nobody wants to talk to him. And so I wasn't very successful in my dealings because he keeps joining every one of them and making a say, and he doesn't let me carry on my business in peace.
The property that you are suing about, this is a property that belonged to your father, who was a pillar in San Francisco for many years. That's where he had his clinic. Can you describe, since you no longer have ownership of this, first of all, who owns this? Does this person associate with Paul Pelosi Jr.? And can you describe the condition of the building now and the activities that are going on there?
My property is currently listed in title with Feng 24th LLC, who's fraudulently using my name to misconstrue the tenants into paying them rent, as well as the city of San Francisco to show that I'm probably still the owner and they don't have to pay property tax. And so I kept getting property tax bills and collections in which they're not paying, yet they're taking the property. The owner of Feng 24th LLC is actually owned by West Edge Halo Inc., short for weed, because their purpose is to farm marijuana in the basement. The signer of weed is Georgina Ramirez Rodriguez. The mastermind of weed is Bill, aka William Garlock. Paul Pelosi Jr. is listed as the main point of contact, according to the reporter Joe Eskenazi from the Mission Local News, that he witnessed Paul Pelosi Jr. during a violations hearing that Georgina Rodriguez caused. There are drugs and prostitution in the house right now, as I saw it recorded and uploaded on YouTube.
And when did Paul Pelosi Jr., since he's the point of contact on this building, I mean, was he involved in the sale of this building from you to this weed company, and you feel this was a fraudulent sale?
It's definitely a fraudulent sale. I never even knew who the buyers were. I've never done a real estate or business transaction in which somebody would spend millions of dollars according to what they're offering, but they never really paid. Actually, they never paid. That they would purchase something, millions of dollars, without even seeing the property, knowing about the property, or knowing who the owner was, and the owner not knowing who the buyer is. I never heard of that. So when I was out of the country doing passport compliance, because Paul took my passport, and that's a separate issue, that he took my vital records, my birth certificate, my children's vital records and birth certificate, to prevent me from leaving the country because he wants to be in full control of. I have no idea what's that for. As I was out of the country trying to get my birth certificate requirement complied with, I suddenly received an email from David Lonich, who's currently in jail, in federal prison for scamming some Sonoma bank fraud of some $2.6 million or something. And he was like sentenced to 6 years or more in prison. During that time, I received an email from him. And on the email, it has a complaint on me saying that I should be selling them my property. And I didn't know anything about it. And when I read the document, the purchase agreement, it had Paul Pelosi's name on it as agent, and it has my signature supposedly as the seller. I never signed it, and of course I knew who did.
When Nancy Pelosi was coming to your father's clinic, did you get the impression that she knew about her son's business activities?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know if she knew or she didn't know, but she was minding her own stuff, and it seems very odd that she gives Paul Pelosi Jr. her only son, and I haven't heard anything she's doing it for her daughters. She give all power to Paul Pelosi Jr. and everything he does or says on the phone, in my house, or everywhere, he uses his mom's name everywhere. It's like, I'm calling from Nancy Pelosi's office, and I want this, I want that. Then he calls another business entity. Oh, I'm from Nancy Pelosi's office. So he uses that all day, and there's never any comments from his mom's office. It seems like she knows about it because he's been doing it for years, and he's running his business like that. Everything he wants, he just claims it's from her office, and she supports it.
So you heard him say when he was doing business on the phone with people that he represents Nancy Pelosi's office?
Yeah, he said, I'm calling from Nancy Pelosi's office. He says that at almost every call he makes.
What would your late father say about the fact that his business is now in this building that is filled with allegedly drugs and prostitution?
My dad would be so disappointed.
Can you, now there was a call, your CPS case began with an anonymous call on October 5th, 2018. And the anonymous call to CPS, according to this petition against you, which was filed, talks about how you are allegedly mentally unstable because you were imagining that you had some kind of relationship with Paul Pelosi Jr. And it goes into very specific details about your interactions with him. Now, we have obviously all the photographs, all the documented evidence of your years together. It seems then that, either this call was made by Paul Pelosi Jr. or someone who very intimately knew the details of your relationship, which he was trying to keep secret. Can you talk about what happened when you confronted him about and accused him of making that call?
When I asked Paul Pelosi why did he do such a thing, even though he already warned me he will and texted me he will, he said he didn't. He said he doesn't know who did. And I said, how come I have a hard time believing that? Because the details are so, like you said, private, intimate, right? How would anyone know about that? He just doesn't want to admit to anything. And then he said he's going to prove it by writing a letter to court supporting the children in my reunification. But later on, when he went to court physically to show himself, to present himself as proof that I do know him because he claims he knows me back, then during court, he refused to go into court. Rather, he pulled the social worker, Brian Hawkinson of Santa Clara, the social worker there, out and he made him meet him at another place called the Olympic Club. It's somewhere in San Francisco. So they managed to have a drive all the way to Olympic Club in O'Farrell Boulevard of San Francisco. And over there, they had hours of conversation where Brian Hawkinson thinks he's crazy. He said, Paul Pelosi keeps saying that he's not going to have a relationship with anyone, that he doesn't like animals, that he doesn't think he doesn't think that patent I did with the detox machine I did earlier with my business. I had a patent of a detox machine. He doesn't think that that's my patent. And then it said he asked, Brian Hawkinson asked him a variety of things, and his answers made Brian Hawkinson start to think he has mental issues. And then so he was eating and exercising, and then he pasted like lotion all over his face, and then Brian Hawkinson actually put it in the court petition on the second petition of Santa Clara against me for the CPS case, that what he observed Paul Pelosi did, and said that he had extra lotion on his ear, and it made some type of a remark about him being weird. But yeah, it's
Karina, when Paul threatened you over text to saying that he was going to make sure that CPS took away your children, what did he say, and what was the dispute between you at the time that made him say that?
We had a dispute with the property 2 times. So the first time is with Craig Johnson, which is a Warrior basketball game owner, part owner. So Craig Johnson was a mortgage holder of our mixed-use commercial property. So he was a sole mortgage holder, and he gave that mortgage note to Paul Pelosi, 100% without comment. It's very, very strange. And so, Paul Pelosi was able to manage to try to foreclose my building the first time. And then later on, he came back and tried to sell the title out to Weed. So that's the two incidences.
And now that your children have been away from you for a year, how often do you get to see them?
I haven't seen them very much. In the beginning, through Christmas, through my birthday, through my son's birthday, New Year's Eve, Chinese New Year, no children, no visiting, nothing. So after I managed to see my children at the placement at NurFriend, which is non-blood related family friend. So we were able to place the children in a short period of time in the NurFriend household. And in that opportunity, the children told me that the reason why I wasn't able to see them throughout Christmas and the holidays and the birthdays, all alone, separated, and the children were separated within the siblings as well, was because the foster home had a fight within each other. And was the foster home caregivers, and they had a dispute among themselves. They were drunk, beating each other up, throwing glasses, dishes, and then they flipped each other over the floor, and they got nails popping up on the floors, and then the children were running there, and he scraped his face on it, and there's a nail went into his jaw, and then one of the dish cut across his eyebrow, and they were afraid that I see it. So it took them a whole holiday vacation of about a month or 2 to heal. So that it actually caused me a lot of concern, because at that time my daughter went missing. I don't know if it's intentional. When she got home, they let her go on the school bus. My 13-year-old daughter, they let her go on the school bus to some Boulder Creek secluded area, Santa Cruz in the mountains, where there's no signs of where the streets are or anything. So they were placed over there, and when they were driven home with the school bus, did not pick her up from the wilderness. He left her there. I don't know if it's intentional or what, and she was lost there for hours. There's not another human being. It's all trees in the wilderness. It could be wild animals roaming around. And then she had her cell phone, which the caregiver said she charged for her, and she opened it. It was dead. It was like intentional. How could it be such coincidental thing that you don't pick her up from the school bus stop, which is miles from your home, and you don't give her a working cell phone so she can call 911? everything. And then when she looked in her pocket for the phone number, she waited for hours. Finally, there's like one white SUV that pulled by her, and she cried for help. They asked her, where should we bring you? How do we help you? She doesn't know. She remembered, she copied his phone number down, and the note was missing from her pocket. And so luckily she copied another one on her own on a private note. And whoever took that one note out, she had a second one. And with that, she was able to find her way home. That stranger had her go into his car, and she had no choice. And that stranger she was lucky enough, the stranger brought her back to his house, and couldn't say, oh, I don't know, because he didn't know who the caller phone ID was, so he picked up the phone. Whatever his intention was, my daughter was lucky enough to find herself back home. But all the while, my second daughter was waiting in tears. And when she was at my house, she during the Christmas vacation and the New Year's, she has no mom to be with. She already doesn't have a dad, okay? And then now she doesn't even have a mom. She's forced to be an orphan of some sort and into a stranger's world, and who doesn't cherish them as children. But anyways, my second daughter was just minding her own business, playing her Disneyland. It's like a clear nail polish with little sparkles on it. The little girls like to play with that. She was 9 years old at the time. Mm-hmm. And grabbed it from her and says she wants to put it on her own nails. And Katie, who was just my 9-year-old at the time, Katie says, can you please give me back my nail polish? That's all I have. You guys don't let me have any toys. I don't have my mom. I don't have my siblings. I don't have anything but a nail polish. Can you leave me alone? And start running. And she said, no, why don't we share? And Katie said, at least let me finish. And then she said, no, I want it right now. And so Katie chased after her, and she fell over. And then it went over his laptop, and it broke his laptop, and she punched the soul out of. And then he said, it's Katie's fault. Kill her. And we'll just say that some school bully killed her and just blame it on the school, and nobody will ever find out. So got up and chased after Katie, and Katie ran for her life. And as she went to school, everybody saw chasing after Katie, and Katie didn't know how she ran. She got away with that. She just prayed to God and ran at the same time. And then as she got to the school friends and classmates and teachers says, why is chasing after you? She said, I don't know, he's mad at me, and then he wants to kill me and beat me up or whatever it is. And then over a nail polish that his wife took. And then the kids go, and then the school is called elementary, and then the kids and the staff goes, oh, too bad. They just walked away. When your children had these wounds on your face and you saw them for the first time, they didn't want you to know how it happened? No, it wasn't on the kids. It was on the foster parents themselves. They were hitting each other. I see. Yeah. What do your children feel about living? How do they feel about living in this situation now when you see them? So they go home. They have to hide in the room and lock the door, and then to break the door. And before it comes down, Katie would tell to don't break his own door, and then he'll back off for a while, and they'll be hiding in tears every day. That's how they live through the foster home during the Santa Clara days. And that's just a sample of what happens. And there's other things like eating dog food just because they didn't want to cook. They fed them tap water because they didn't let them drink any beverage. And when they were taking a bath, they put very, very little bit water, like 2 inches, an inch and a half, something like that, just so that they'll get wet and they look like they had a shower. Yeah, they're pretty neglected. How many children do you have, and what are their names and ages? I have 4 children, 4 beautiful children. The oldest one is 13. Her name's Lillian Feng. Second one is Katie Feng. third one is Max Feng, aka Edward Feng, and my baby is Rosie Feng.
And how old is your baby?
She's born on November 25th. She's almost a year old.
Almost a year old. Now, in the process that you've been going through, the CPS process, has anyone threatened you? Has anyone told you that it's probably not likely that you're going to get the kids back?
Oh, of course. I get threats every single time I speak to CPS. Starting Santa Clara, I bumped into a CPS attorney named Arthur Tan. He said, I told him the facts. I Googled all the information about my property. I gave him Paul Pelosi's phone number to call him directly to verify. I told him I can take any mental test they want, and I actually just took one, and it was cleared. Everything was clear. Then he said, just do as I say, or you'll never see your children again. I said, what should I do? He said, just shut up. Just be quiet. Don't make a sound. Otherwise, we'll tell the facilities to take you again, or throw you in a ward or something, in order to teach you to listen and submit to CPS.
So that's what the social worker said to you?
That's what the CPS attorney, who's supposed to represent parents, said to me.
Can you talk about, your message to, first of all, what's your message to Paul Pelosi Jr., knowing that this started with an anonymous call involving, him, his name, his story being involved in that anonymous call that sparked this, because they said you were hallucinating your relationship with him, and obviously you weren't. And so, that's how this started. How this process started that got your kids taken away. What's your message to him?
I give up on him. I don't really have anything to say to him anymore. I'm very disappointed, and I'm not sure why he chooses to do that to people. I understand that I know him very well, and I understand that anyone who ends up being his lover, girlfriend, or wife will end up in court with him. So it's actually in his birth chart. It's very weird. But yeah, so when we talk about things, sometimes we talk about birth charts and numerology and numbers like that. But it's very interesting. We just find some things to chat about. Yeah, those are subjects we chat about. And that actually was brought up, that whoever was his significant other would end up in court with him.
When he talks about hurting people, breaking people's legs, this kind of thing,
yeah.
Does he feel that he's invincible because of who his mother is?
Yeah, there was one time I was in tears, and I told Paul very seriously that I don't want to go on with a relationship anymore, because he keeps screwing his friends up, screwing the people he knows up, screwing people that trust him up, going behind their back to do things that will hurt them. And he does that, and he thinks it's funny, and he likes it, and he doesn't care. So anybody who associates with him is in big trouble, because over time, if he knows about them, he'll do anything to hurt them. And I have been reminding him over and over again that that is the wrong thing to do. You cannot treat people like that. And when I told him about Gandhi upstairs, the guy who was the master tenant upstairs prior to all this, he wants to buy off Gandhi to take over the top floor, that way turning the entire property into a mansion and then doing some like senior home on the first floor. I'm not exactly sure, but then later on I found out that he was actually doing that in a large scale throughout Northern California, called NorCal Care. They're actually taking people's titles everywhere. As soon as they find that they have a basement, and that they're a single person or an old elderly person or a minority or somebody who just owns a lot of properties, they'll take their title. And that happened to So many people. All you have to do is Google NorCal Care. They're all owned by Bill Garlock, and all of them have a basement that they're doing weed farming, and first floor they're fronting it with senior home, NorCal Care. And so they were trying to do that to my building. So initially Paul wanted to break his legs because that tenant didn't want to leave. And then when I was talking about getting the children back to I'm moving our conversation back a bit. We're talking about CPS again instead of my building. So when you were saying what kind of message I had to Paul Pelosi, during that time, I was saying you shouldn't do that to me. I mean, out of all the people, I'm always standing by you. Your whole time, I'm shutting up, being private, and let you do whatever you feel like, even threatening my life. And then you come back and hurt me and my children for what? Just because you feel like it? Or does that make you happy? Or because you just feel like it's the right time because you don't want anybody to find out about what you did to my property? Anyways, so he wanted to prove to court that he wasn't the person that called. And instead of using other ways of proving, he wanted to go in person to court and write a letter. And as in February 13th of this year, so he spent the entire week in my San Mateo apartment. So that night, he was right next to me in bed, and he said that if the social worker don't bring back your children, I'll break their legs. He's saying the same thing over and over again. I said, can you do it in a nice way? Okay, just do it. You created the problem, okay? I didn't create the problem. And if they don't listen, we'll just break their legs. And one time when he was trying to get me out of my own property, he went to plannings and made the entire place switch from a mixed-use residential commercial building into a commercial only. So all the residential people have to leave, including me. So that didn't really work right away, but because he was working very closely to the planning to make it, to use their power to get me out of my property, out of my home. So what he did was he went into my kitchen and ripped out the entire kitchen. So that way I can't cook for my kids or cook for anyone or even him. So when I can't cook, I probably won't be able to live there. So he's thinking in a domino effect way, so to get me out of the property faster by ripping out my stove. But he couldn't do it himself. So he got a street person. He pulled a street person, offered him some cash, and said, come in and help me with some work. And he saw the cash and he came in and helped him rip the stove off. As the stove was ripped, it fell on that guy. He was like, so Paul was on the top and he was on the bottom pulling. So one on top, and then Paul kind of slammed it over. It went over his head. That guy was crying. He said, the stove is crushing my head. It's going to split my head. And then Paul goes, so what? And I ran over there. I heard it from the front of the entrance. I heard it. I ran over and I said, Paul, stop. Get that stove off that poor man's head. He's going to die. Don't do that. And he said, so what? I'm like, oh my God, how can you do that to someone? Anyways, so that's just how he is. If he wants to hurt somebody, he'll hurt somebody. He doesn't care. It's for his convenience. I don't know if it's based on his mom's power. I don't know. But he certainly acts as if it is. And he has a personality that's just all about himself.
Did you ever see him fly into a rage?
Oh, yeah. He sure flew into a rage when my dad... So when my dad got arrested, I hired 2 private attorneys. One was the president of the Bar Association and another guy. And then Paul saw it and he didn't like me hiring anybody. He wanted my dad to use a public defender no matter what. And I said, what's wrong with spending money on an attorney? What's wrong with that? And he doesn't like it. He said, I want you guys to save money. And I'm like, it's not about saving money. My dad's arrested. I want my dad to have the best possible defense attorney, right? And then, so instead of communicating in a meeting of the minds, he went and punched the attorney. He punched my attorney. He punched him right there, and everybody in the federal courthouse just turned around and acted like they didn't see anything.
When your father was arrested, he was a long-time, doctor in San Francisco. He was arrested, I believe, for selling Chinese medicines and treatments that were not FDA approved. Is that right?
Yeah, they weren't FDA approved. They weren't even approved these days. They were never approved. Those are just, they call it supplements or something. Those things aren't approved. They don't need to be approved. As many times as they go through the approval process, the same result happened. It's not within their scope.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that Paul Pelosi Jr. was involved in your father's arrest?
Of course, yes, because Miss Milliken, is not our patient. Her son, who has whatever, it's, I guess, medical information, I'll just keep that private. Her son has some problems and no money. And my dad felt sorry for the young guy. And so he said, I'll help you as best as I could. And his mother doesn't like Chinese people or Asian people of any sort. So what she did was she's outside the clinic waiting for her son to be treated every single time her son comes. So one time when I was coming back, I bumped into her. I said, excuse me, ma'am, why don't you wait inside? Outside is pretty cold. And she said, you want me to go into some Chinese clinic? Hell no. And she was like speaking in a language that was pretty rude. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's wrong with you. You seem like you're a hate person. So I don't, I was just trying to make you feel better instead of like standing out here in the cold. But, that's what she wanted. And so she never came in. And then the day my dad got arrested, on the day my dad got arrested, his allegations was based on a plaintiff named Miss Milliken. And when I asked who Miss Milliken was, my dad said it was a woman waiting outside yesterday, and I saw her talking to Paul. Paul didn't even come in yesterday. That day. He was talking to her for hours, and then they left, each going their ways, and when her son went out. So, and the very next day, my dad got arrested, and then later on, I found out it was Miss Milliken. So it's either coincidental or it doesn't seem coincidental. It's way too coincidental. He doesn't stand outside talking to anyone. This is the first time I saw him stand outside my dad's clinic talking to someone.
Did he ever hit you?
Not yet, but he was inches from my face. Yes, he did try to hit me.
Okay. What's your message to other parents who are going through this Child Protective Services process? I know in California it's horrifying, and what's your message to them as you go through this essentially alone?
I don't think the parents will get anywhere with their tears, with their efforts, with their submission to CPS. All it's going to do is going to help them with more visits. The whole intention of CPS seemingly is that they're trying to delay the process so it reach the 15-month mark so the kids will be thrown into adoption. And with that, they'll lose connection with their parents. In foster home, that's where they get their bulk of the incentive. I don't see anyone winning the CPS. The only person in the whole nation I ever heard that any lawyer that ever won for a CPS family permanently, and not just like, oh, I got your kids back, yay, and then they're taken like 2 months later, and then the cycle revolves, is by Dennis Slate of Texas. He's the only one who's saved the family, not intentionally. He was just fighting a case and not wanting to join a part of the CPS team. He just fighting a case like any normal attorney should be, and just speaking the truth for the parent like an attorney should be on an ethical basis, and just saying, you guys have incomplete evidence on the parents, and what you're allegating against the parents are hearsay. It's incomplete and it's hearsay, and there's nothing in support of what you're accusing the parents of to to amount to taking their children away. And so with that, they won close to $300,000 in 1 month. And I haven't seen anyone that suffered so shortly and got what they deserved back in return, which was close to $300,000 in damages, which every parent in the United States deserved to have as well. But no attorney is willing to help them.
When you talk about the 15-month mark, you're referring to the Adoption and Safe Families Act, which was passed by Bill Clinton and spearheaded by Hillary Clinton in the 90s, which incentivizes states to adopt children out of foster care. After 15 months, the parents lose all parental rights, and then the states actually receive Social Security money as an incentive to keep the kids in there. What's your message to President Donald Trump and to members of Congress? Do you think that this law that's on the books is a good thing, or do you think it's hurting parents all over the country?
There are two parts to it. First part of the ASFA bill is that they incentivize the social workers for ripping families apart. So they should, in turn, incentivize social workers for bringing families back home. What I think is that if children are placed in shelter, group home, foster home, or whatever they want to do with the children, they have so much opportunity to help the kids. For example, if they're claiming it on abuse, on drugs, on mental issues, or whatever, at least help them. Why do they come up with all kinds of human services and all these good ideas and fabrication, whatever you call it, yet do nothing for the families and make it worse for the children and families by tearing them apart? The second part of it is if the families are not brought together, could the social workers be scrutinized for delaying reunification? They're doing everything right now to make reunification impossible. What they're doing is placing the children in some home or some foster care or adoption so that it'll last all the way till they're 18 or over. And they're not telling anyone about the emancipation age, or they're not honoring any of, they're really not respecting the children and what they want. If they really want to care for orphans, like it was meant to be a foundation by Hillary Clinton, and then later on matured into this ASFA bill. If you go and ask the writers of this bill, do you have any children or know how to take care of kids, and who are you to do this? They really don't know. They actually say they don't know how to take care of children. Then how are you supposed to challenge the children's parents how to take care of children when nobody can substitute somebody's child? Nobody can substitute a parent for their child. Nobody, really. There's no substitution. It doesn't matter how bad the parenting style is, or how they think the parent is wrong, or whatever standard each social worker have their variations of a good parent. Nobody is better than a child's own biological parent, because when time comes, only the biological parent show true love. And the protection that they call Child Protective Services is only protecting the children from their parents. They're not protecting the children from harm or anything else. Exploiting them to the world is doing nothing but hurting them. And the children really needs to be with their family, and families need to be together. Without the family being together, the building blocks of the community is broken. And how can it be a great America, or a let's bring America back great again, if the building blocks of the communities are destroyed?
Ms. Feng, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking out. It's very brave, and we really appreciate it. You're a good person, and we really hope that you get justice for your family, for your kids, and for your father. May he rest in peace, and God bless you, ma'am.
Also,
yes, please. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. right now, the situation with the foster care with my children, because we're talking about on a general scale with CPS. So with my children and what they're going through with foster care right now, Amy Yim is the San Francisco social worker who's perpetrated my children from getting reunified successfully with me. Amy Yim arranged a conspirator PhD psychiatrist named Amy Watt to take a 7:30 evaluation, which my CPS attorney at that time was Vincent Davis. That he insisted I get that evaluation. One wonders if your attorney is taking care of your best interest, but with a CPS attorney like Vincent Davis, he exploited me to something that did not fit into my situation, rather exposes me to fraud, which did in fact happen. The 7:30 evaluator, Dr. Amy Watt, was part of Amy Yim's team. Amy Watt would ask me whether I feel depressed, for example. I would say no. Then the very next question would be, when you feel depressed, would you eat more or less? And if you answer you would eat more, then you're admitting to being depressed. If you ate less, then you would be depressed. And you know, whatever choice the answers are, you're depressed. So so the result is whatever they say you are, and that could be anything. So that anyone who takes the test will come out with a mental illness. So Amy Yim does not allow me to go to any psychiatrist or doctor of my choice, and Amy Yim requires I only see the doctor of her choice after Amy Yim instructs that conspirator doctor what to write in the diagnosis. And Amy Yim only works with CPS lawyers representing me if that lawyer is willing to help the CPS as a team member in getting the family split into a foster home. And my children were treated the same. Yesterday morning, Amy Yim went to their school with a surprise appearance, continuing the harassment and psychiatric assessment of each child during school time. They're not allowed to drink anything but tap water and eat whatever the foster home allows. And if the foster home is lazy in preparing food, they would all regularly feed my children with dog food. My children are being tortured, disrespected, and trashed in foster home. The foster home does not allow my son to cut his hair, nor allow me to take care of my children's needs, including nail trimming, hair cutting, or breastfeeding, are all not allowed. My children are not allowed to have toys that I bring them, nor any snacks without Amy Yim's approval. And any other social worker or supervisor's approval is not allowed. And only Amy Yim, because she said so. Right now, Amy Yim insists on giving my barely 10 years old daughter general whole body anesthesia for dental treatment that other dentists already declared is not necessary. So Amy Yim insists on getting my daughter's life in danger. So I wanted to add that. Thank you.
Do you have siblings and other family members?
I do. I have.
And
I have a ton of siblings. They're my sibling, my cousin, my sibling is half brothers, half sister, and my cousins are, so we have the same amount of blood relation. My older cousin, she's a PhD psychiatrist in Stanford, and she doesn't mess with CPS. She doesn't want to be a part of their team. There's some good doctors, and some doctors that are part of their team in the conspiracy. They have their own group of people. They invite people to join them, and they be part of their group, and they'll take care of each other, including process servers. So they have their own group of people. My second cousin is an engineer. My third cousin is a hospital administrator. My older brother is also a PhD and also a dentist. So we have a bunch of professions in the family.
And I imagine they're outraged about what's happened to you.
Yeah, they are. They don't know what to do. Yeah, we are all pushed to a corner and witness our children suffer and go into a hellhole, a death row of some sort, and we can't do anything to help our own children.
Ms. Feng, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.